Aloha, it's 2:32 p.m. on Tuesday, November 28, 2023, and I call the Committee on Housing, Sustainability, and Health special meeting to order. I welcome Vice Chair Kiaina, Councilmembers Dos Santos Tam and Toba to the chamber. I believe our other council members will be coming shortly. Pursuant to Hawaii Revised Statute, Section 92-3.7, this meeting will be conducted as a remote meeting by interactive conference technology with the following procedures in effect for the meeting. Members of the public will be allowed to provide oral testimony remotely or in person in the council chamber on all items on the agenda when each item is taken up. All persons who registered to testify in person will be called upon first, followed by those who registered to testify remotely. Persons who have not registered will be given an opportunity to testify following the registered testifiers. For those standing by remotely, please utilize the Zoom raise hand feature to indicate your desire to speak. And for those joining us by telephone only, please press *9 to indicate your desire to speak. I'll identify you by the last 3 digits of your phone number, and when your number is called, press *6 to unmute yourself when prompted. Before testifying, each person shall state their full name and will be limited to a 1-minute presentation on each item. HRS Section 92-3.7 requires all votes at a remote meeting be conducted by a roll call unless unanimous. I'll first call for objections, and if there are any, I'll call for a roll call vote. For those council members participating from outside of the chamber under HRS Section 92-3.7, the meeting will automatically recess if we lose audiovisual contact with you and cannot reconvene until we reestablish contact. Therefore, please announce beforehand if you'll be voluntarily signing off. I don't believe we have any council members online at the moment remotely. Written testimonies, including the testifier's address, email address, and phone number, will be available to the public as described on the posted agenda. As a courtesy, please turn off all cell phones. I do welcome Councilmember Okimoto to the chamber as well. And now turn to agenda item number 1 for action, Bill 56, 2023, establishing a commercial property assessed financing program for financing certain qualifying improvements. Members, we have posted to the agenda a proposed CD1 OCS 2023-0994 to the bill submitted by Council Chair Waters. For your information, the summary of the amendments is listed on the agenda. We also have a hand-carried proposed CD1 OCS 2023-1072 version of the bill submitted by myself, and the hand-carried CD1 makes the following amendments to the version posted on the agenda currently. And so paragraph A would read, in section 1 of the bill, replaces the term loans with financing, clarifies the description of the commercial property assessed clean energy CPACE program, specifies that the CPACE program is a potential tool to address critical issues affecting the city, and states that fire sprinkler systems are a critical issue affecting the city. Paragraph B1B replaces the definition of CPACE assessment with a non-ad valorem special tax assessment levied on qualifying properties. It secures the repayment of the CPACE financing as provided in this article and the CPACE administration agreement. Paragraph B1C changes the defined term CPACE loan to CPACE financing and replaces the definition of CPACE financing with, I quote, financing approved by the program administrator and the CPACE lender in favor of an owner of a qualifying property to finance a qualifying improvement in accordance with this article and the CPACE administration agreement. Realphabetizes this term in the list of defined items. Paragraph B1F will now read, or would read, replaces the definition of CPACE program with a program to finance qualifying improvements on qualifying properties that are repaid through CPACE assessments levied and collected in accordance with this article and the CPACE administration agreement to the extent permitted by law. Paragraph B1G would read, amends the definition of program guidelines by adding program costs, and paragraph B1H would read, amends the definition of qualifying improvement by replacing the term authority with program administrator. Paragraph 4 would read, amends proposed ROH section 2-_.3b by replacing the word chapter with article, removing the reference to part 4 of HRS chapter 196, and to HRS Section 46-80B, and replacing the term loan with financing. Also adds that the city may delegate in addition to assigning its obligations to the extent the assignment and delegation are permitted by law. Also adds that the city is not responsible for amounts owed under any CPACE financing agreement. These amendments were made, I believe they're included in also communications posted from Department of Budget and Fiscal Services. I believe we have Director Quano here as well on behalf of the administration. We incorporated most of those amendments into our hand-carried in addition to the amendments in Chair Waters' proposed hand-carried. The only portions of BFS's requests that we left out, and you can go ahead and come up, Director, if you want to add anything, were those that included a specific delegation by the city to another entity to do either liens or collection, which under HRS, there were questions about whether that was legal. Director Quano, I'll turn it over to you if you have any thoughts on either the hand-carried. I know you may not have reviewed it yet, but with that explanation of what was included, please go ahead.
Thank you, Housing Chair Wire and council members. Yeah, I quickly read through the hand-carry and wanted to share with you that we are currently on our third turn of the Memorandum of Agreement with HGIA. And at this point in time, HGIA has decided to take on the delegation and full responsibility of the administration of the CPACE program. So that would include billing, collecting, and enforcement, as a part of the administration, enforcement of the lien, so to speak. So they would take on full responsibility of that and handle any foreclosure proceedings that may need to take place. And they also, as a result, have agreed to do standalone billing. So the billing for these CPACE assessments will not be put on the real property tax bill. They will, through their own systems, do their own billing as well.
That's great to hear, because that will hopefully lessen the burden on the city. And just one quick question. So that MOA, would that then come through council later by way of resolution?
It will be presented to council. We're still going through drafts of the MOA. There are about 3 or 4 things left out of our proposed Department Communication 800 that I wanted to touch bases on, just so you're aware of some of the clauses that were not included.
Of course, I'm all over that.
So in the first section, Section 1, Paragraph 2, we tried to address concerns expressed by owners of commercial and agricultural properties at the last committee and council meetings. They did not want an involuntary program. They wanted it to be voluntary, so that we put in a clause to make clear that the program would be voluntary. So that's the first one. So that's Section 1, Paragraph 2. Under the definition section for CPACE assessments and the CPACE program, we removed references that the special assessments are levied by the city because due to HGIA's agreement to take on full delegation, we will not have to levy any special assessments. It'll be handled by HGIA. That would also be consistent with Section 2-blank.3b, which has permissive language that the obligations of the city and so on may include billing, collection, etc., not, will be levied or are levied. That change would also be consistent with the latest draft of the MOA, Memorandum of Agreement. So we recommend that that clause be put back in.
Could you just clarify that again, the specific clause out of what you were just discussing?
Yeah, it might be better to read our version of Department Communications 800 for Bill 56. Let me get to that right now.
Perfect. I believe that was also just passed out to the members.
Yeah. So the definition of CPACE assessment reads as follows: a non-ad valorem special tax assessment. Oh, excuse me, this is the wrong one.
And while Director's looking through, so we can go right into it after, are there going to be any questions for him? Of course, no one's barred from raising them when they come up, but
Okay.
okay.
So our version of the proposed Bill 56 CD1 reads under CPACE assessment, a non-ad valorem special assessment levied on qualifying property that secures the repayment of the CPACE financing as provided in this article and the CPACE administration agreement. We wanted it to be clear that the city is not levying the assessment. So that's how Department Communication 800 reads that version of CD1.
And then were there additional ones as well? I see you still reading, Director.
Yes, there's two more.
Okay.
Under section 2-blank.3B, we want to ensure that the city and HGIA may delegate, assign obligations for levying, collection, and enforcement of the arrangement of the CPACER agreement. HGIA included in the current version of the MOA a provision allowing HGIA to employ a third party to undertake its obligations under the agreement. The current MOA also requires the delegating party, not the city, to monitor the fulfillment of the obligations. It also makes clear that the city has no responsibility for any amounts owed under the CPACE financing agreement. Therefore, we recommend that this section 2-blank.3 small b, be replaced with the city's version of Bill 56 CD1 as proposed. And then the last comment, Chair, under section 2-blank.4, we proposed a new section C similar to an article in our MOA that allows the HGIA agreement to continue in the event the city decides to terminate the administrative agreement. In other words, if HGIA and CPACE and the CPACER lender approves a 15 to 20 year loan and the city terminates at year 10 the obligations under the financing agreements, and city terminates in year 10, the obligations under the finance agreements as well as levying, collecting, enforcement of loan agreements survive, and HGIA and CPACER lender will self-monitor the program. So essentially, the CPACER agreement is really agreement between the borrower, the lender, and HGIA. The city's not a party to the CPACER financing agreement. Therefore, we recommend that final section be put in.
Okay, I do appreciate that insight. And just to make sure I understood correctly, were you saying that were all of those reference sections also currently in the drafted or contemplated to be in the drafted memorandum of agreement?
Yes.
Okay.
So it's currently in Department Communication 800.
Okay, and I just note that, or would just make sure we're on the same page that absent that language in the ordinance, it wouldn't preclude that language being placed in the MOA. Is that your understanding?
No, it wouldn't. And the language that we're recommending, those 4 sections, would align with the current and latest draft of the MOA that we're working on.
Okay, appreciate that. And so thank you for your insight. I'll just will note, as mentioned earlier, sections we left out of abundance of caution related to the city's authority to delegate. I'm sure Corporation Council will do a full analysis of the MOA, but in terms of what we're codifying, it sounds like it's not going to interfere with the MOA. And then we do specify that the city is not responsible for amounts owed under CPACE financing. I'll ask again quickly before we go to testimony if there's any questions for Director. I don't see any, so appreciate.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, appreciate it, Director. I'll go to first registered in-person testifiers. We have Gwen Yamamoto Lau. If there's anyone else wishing to testify in person, unregistered, please come up to the front as well to go next. I'll turn it over to you, Ms. Yamamoto Lau.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Gwen Yamamoto Lau, the Hawaii Green Infrastructure Authority. I stand on my written testimony in strong support, and as Director Kawana mentioned, we are working very hard on the memorandum of agreement. Thank you.
Thank you, Mala, for all the work that you're doing. We'll ask if there's any questions for the testifier, and sensing none, thank you. And sensing no other or seeing no other in-person testifiers, we'll go over to remote testimony. We can go past number 1 on the registered list as she testified in person. And then we'll go next to Cliff Kellogg, followed by Michael Yaki, followed by Mark Glick. So Mr. Kellogg, please proceed.
Good afternoon, Chair Wire and Vice Chair and members of the committee. My name is Cliff Kellogg. I'm here on behalf of the CPACE Alliance, and we are here to testify in support of Bill 56 to establish the CPACER program. More than 30 states and the District of Columbia have adopted similar statutes, facilitating over $5 billion in private financing from entities for more than 3,000 properties. CPACE is an additional option for property owners to voluntarily get the financing they're seeking if they wish. There is no mandate on property owners of any type if this ordinance and this program come to pass. And we welcome the legal analysis that the chair referred to about the legal authority to delegate and the legal authority to enforce. Those are critical to attract private capital to make sure that we do have a program that is enforceable. And we look forward to that legal analysis, and we would be pleased to follow that guidance at that time. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Kellogg. Any questions for the testifier? Seeing none, we'll go to Mr. Yaki.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you, the member of the committee. My name is Michael Yaki. I am Senior Vice President for PetroSpace Finance. We stand in strong support of Council Bill 56 as well as the amendments of the chair. I would just want to state that we also stand with the remarks made by the previous speaker with regard to the need for the council of the county to be involved in this. There are going to be some interesting legal issues in the MOA that we're going to need to make sure we really take a hard look at to make sure that we fulfill all the things necessary to make this program work. But we are very pleased with this ordinance. We are very happy with the work that you've done. As it is written, it is something that we can definitely work with property owners to finance improvements in Oahu, but we'll just need to make sure that we will continue to seek your support and the support of your council on the agreement with the city. Thank you very much, and mahalo.
Mahalo. Any questions for the testifier? Seeing none. Thank you, Mr. Yaki. We'll go to Mr. Glick.
Chair, testifier is not present.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. Are there any other unregistered online testifiers?
Chair, there are none.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. We'll close testimony and then enter discussion before I make my recommendation. Any discussion from the committee? Seeing none, the chair is then going to recommend that Bill 56, 2023 be amended to the hand-carried CD1 OCS 2023-1072/11/28/2023, 9:13 a.m. As discussed. Any discussion, any objections, reservations? Hearing none, the bill is amended to CD1, and the chair recommends that Bill 56, 2023 CD1 be reported out for passage on third reading. Any discussion, objections, or reservations? Hearing none, so ordered. Thank you, everyone that testified today on that item. We'll move on to agenda item number 2. This is for discussion only. Resolution 23-260, requesting that Partners in Care expand on the Oahu point in time count while ensuring that the point in time count continues to meet federal regulations. We do have Laura Thielen here, this side, from Partners in Care. If you want to go ahead and come up, and I'll just look to see if we have any testifiers for this item. So I see no registered or unregistered. Ms. Director Thielen, do you want to walk through maybe your thoughts on the resolution? And just push that button as well. Thank you.
Okay, there we go. My name is Laura Thielen, and I'm the Executive Director of Partners in Care. And we are mandated by HUD to be the lead agency for the point-in-time count that we do. HUD actually requires us to do it at least once every 2 years, but for the last 20-some years, except for 2021 due to COVID, we've done it every year because we feel that it's very important to see the trends on a year-to-year basis. In regards to the resolution, we pretty much agree with everything in there. We do not feel that there's a need to have the resolution. The only difference that we have here with the resolution is it was recommended that we move the point in time count to multiple days. And because of the data and because of our need to have as clean of data as possible, we are opposed to this. We do feel that we get the majority of people interviewed and counted on the one day. And if we move to a second day, we would have to cut out all of the data that was just observed because there's no way for us to double check and see if they had already been interviewed. So that's the one part of this resolution that we are opposed to. But everything in here otherwise is already done. We have 7 regions across Oahu, and each one of those regions has a lead agency who has the outreach contract and other programs in that vicinity. We meet with them constantly starting in September. We do utilize maps to figure out where encampments are or where people are that we want to make sure that we're counting. And it's just a reminder that this is a snapshot in time. Every year we produce a report that is required by HUD, but we also do a community report, and that includes more information than just the point in time count. On average, we have between 3,500 people experiencing houselessness on Oahu, up to 5,000 over the last 10 years. Last year, we counted and interviewed 4,028 individuals. And a lot of those were interviews, and that's where we get so much information. And so, but the reality is, on that day, we count around 4,000 people, but over the course of a year, we see close to 13,000 people get some kind of homeless service here on Oahu. So our report actually looks at both of those data points to make sure that we're addressing the larger issue of homelessness and how it affects our entire community over the course of a year and not just the one day. We bring in about $15.6 million from HUD, and a lot of that is based on the data brought out from our point in time count. So if we we can prove that our data is clean and good data, there's the possibility of more funding coming into our region. So we agree with this whole resolution except for that one day. The neighbor islands do the count on multiple days, but due to their geographic and the low numbers of any number of people experiencing homelessness is too much. But due to the geographic breakdown of the neighbor islands, they feel that they are only counting people once. So we do differ a little bit on that, but we count based on where people slept on the same night, which this coming up year will be January 22nd. So I'm here for any questions, happy to share any information. We've been doing this for a lot of years, and it's getting better and better. And we're pulling more and more information from those interviews. One of the big ones is domestic violence is increasing and kapuna. So we're having a lot more seniors that are experiencing homelessness than we've seen in the past. And this kind of a report, this point in time count, is essential for us to keep an eye on those kinds of things and react with programs that will assist those types of folks. Okay.
Well, hold for that. Were there any questions, Vice Chair? And then Councilmember Dos Santos, Tam, I also want to acknowledge Chair Waters and Chamber. Councilmember Say was present earlier. I think I stepped out.
Thank you so much for your presentation. With regard to, I guess, the underlying measure, then, if on page 2, if number 3, which is expanding the point-in-time count by at least an additional day, is not struck, you would oppose the underlying resolution, correct? I'm just trying to confirm so that when we're in discussion, we could make recommendations.
I would oppose the resolution just on the simple fact of not needing to pass something like this. It's already being done completely, and we're taking time out to address these, and they've already been addressed. So.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Councilmember?
Thank you. With regard to the resolve clauses, I'm looking at bullet point number 2. It says, we recommend that the point in time count be expanded to allow each service provider an unlimited number of volunteers, and that the outreach begin in October. This implies that A, there is a limitation on the number of volunteers, which
there's not.
Can't possibly, I mean, that can't possibly be the case, right?
No.
And then the outreach, I mean, you clearly seem to be handling the outreach well. I did the point in time count for downtown. We had a ton of volunteers. So
yeah. What we do is we really rely on the lead agencies for each region to dictate how they're going to be counting their area. With that, we have maps from them. We some of the providers in certain areas want only providers to go out. And that's based on their knowledge of the area. So if there is an encampment in the woods, kind of tucked away, it's going to be better for a provider who knows that those folks to go out there. So there are some little tweaks here and there, but we have never negated volunteers. We've already started collecting volunteers, and we have like 35. We'll probably have anywhere between 50 and 100 who are not associated with a provider. But the important thing with that is everybody goes out in at least twos. And so if it's a volunteer that doesn't do this work regularly, they can be a standby person and then learn the process. But we also mandate that training has to be done by every single person that participates. And in the past, we have had people that are not quite prepared. There's some sensitive questions on these interviews, and we want to get as much information as possible while still respecting the privacy of the individual who's experiencing homelessness. So we really train folks to be comfortable with the questions so that they can ask and get the information that we need that will hopefully help them in the long term.
And then bullet point number 5 here talks about the point in time count regions and whether they're appropriately arranged or should be rearranged. In your experience, how are these regions assigned, and is there a need to change the boundaries?
That's a really great question. When I was an outreach worker, we didn't have regions. I covered from the airport to Waikiki. That was my region. Over the last 10 years, the state homeless programs office has been in charge of outreach contracts for the majority of outreach providers. nobody seems to know exactly who made the decision on the regions. And so with that, I've talked to our local field office for HUD, and they actually said that we can change them if we feel that there's a need to. So starting in October, we're going to be restarting outreach meetings that will be just focused on outreach. And we're going to be questioning the outreach workers, what makes the most sense. If you haven't heard, we just were informed yesterday that Achieve Zero has shut their doors. They covered 2 regions, so stepping up to figure out what to do in that situation is going to be very important. But we have outreach workers all over saying we're going to pitch in and we're going to help. So we're going to help coordinate that. We're not worried about that for the point in time count. We have U.S. vets as well as H3RC and IHS who are willing to help out, and hopefully anybody who was at Achieve Zero will be able to join one of those teams. So yeah, so we might be changing the geographic makeup of the regions. That will be completely up to the outreach workers and the continuum of care.
Okay, I'm glad that you made that point, because it seems like perhaps this is not something that we need to be pushing at our level if the providers are going to have this conversation amongst themselves.
And it might get to the point where the outreach workers are like, you know what, it doesn't make sense to change it at this point, which is fine. One of the reasons it was designed the way it is simply because outreach workers at that time, they had people in certain places. So I think the lines were drawn a lot due to where they were most comfortable and where they did the most outreach.
Thank you. Also to acknowledge Councilmember Say, and then also wanted to recognize Mayor Rick Blangiardi in the chamber or gallery as well. I believe Councilmember Okimoto had a question.
Thank you, Chair. Aloha, thank you for being here. And I appreciate you explaining your take on the resolution. I think many times we're really well intended, but we don't want to be duplicative or do things that are unnecessary. I did have a couple of questions because it is we understand the importance based on the federal guidelines that the point in time is required. I wanted to know your take, but you gave different numbers, anywhere between 3,500 to 5,000, and then you said in a course over a year you see about 13,000 people. How can we know how accurate the point in time count is based on, and you're doing it for one day, which I understand you explained the need to do it just one day, but I'm a little confused as to how do we know which number is the most accurate?
You're not going to get the answer. I mean, sadly, we can't count every single person on the one day. And if a person has moved, we can't say, oh, this person was here yesterday, so let's count them. In regards to data quality, that's the most important thing, is the integrity of the data that we're collecting. So that's, although HUD requires a certain type of report and it's just numbers, it's not a lot of the information that we collect. A lot of the information we collect is purely for our region to really understand our people. But throughout the year, there are literally 13,000 people that come in and get some kind of service. They could have been homeless for a day. They could have been homeless for the last 5 years. One of the things that we have been doing in the last couple of years for this point in time count is we've got a data point regarding repeaters. So people who have been repeatedly in the point in time count year after year, and that to us indicates that people are not getting the services that they need to get off the streets. What we've also discovered is that a lot of the folks that we're interviewing, they have a higher level of care need, and we don't have those resources in our community. So a lot of those folks are remaining homeless because there's not enough higher level of care services available. We're looking at that from the care home point of view and working with Department of Health to get an increase in incentives for care homes to actually take in folks who are experiencing homelessness, because by and large, they're just saying no at this point. And if there's a mental illness, they're going to say no as well. So we do not have enough resources on that end. But yes, so in the snapshot, we have about 4,000 on one given day. Over the course of the year, upwards of 13,000.
And that 13,000, they're not the same people coming back for services? These are
These are
13,000 different individual.
Yes, there's about 30,000 enrollments or touches with folks, but 13,000 unduplicated people.
Okay. And another follow-up based on the point in time, are you using any other methods other than the point in time, or have you seen anything else work, or do you prefer to use another method to track homelessness, or is this the one that you use and there's no other way to get a more accurate
Yeah, there's
concept
pretty
of it?
much not another way to do this. I mean, if we could do it more frequently, I think we'd get closer to the real numbers. But, you know, there's little areas that do their own counts, like the Waikiki BID, Business Improvement District. They do kind of like a nightly count, as well as, you know, every couple months they do a serious count, because it's a tangible area and their resources can be used for that. That's just too much work on our providers. You know, this is a full day, and that's a lot of time anyway to be not doing stuff for folks to get them moving on their pathway. So yeah, I think this is the best. I was involved, I actually wrote up the first point in time count 20-something years ago, and it was like 5 questions. Now it's like 40, and that's a lot of questions to ask people. But the amount of information we get from it is vital.
Thank you again. And just kind of going off of the premise of how you started off saying the resolution isn't necessary, but as you've stated, things have changed from 5 questions to 40 questions now, or whatever the first number was. What can we do on our end? Because we as a body, what can we do to assist you in your effort to not just account for the homeless population, but get them the services with our jurisdiction of what we are allowed to do? What do you see us as a council being able to do to help assist you?
The biggest thing that the city can do is help us with payments. Our providers are closing their doors, struggling to make ends meet, because the rigors of going through Department of Community Services and BFS are very difficult. It is difficult for both sides. So, you know, we were just talking the other day with Achieve Zero and the city to work on having the city pull reports from our system instead of Achieve Zero. You know, simple things like that we can change. But if we're not getting payments, and it's a struggle for nonprofits to make ends meet, we're not paying our outreach workers enough. I mean, they are getting horrible pay in regards to, in my opinion, is the hardest job in this field. So support on those kinds of things, streamlining the payments. We've streamlined some things, and it's been really great. We had a program during COVID called the Oahu Housing Now Project, and we got our payments down to like 45 days. And that's amazing, but that should be the norm. That shouldn't be the exception. So working really rigorously with the different bodies, everybody understands that that's the problem. We just have to figure out how can we get these things moving along. And some of those ideas are inventive ideas, like, you know, separating payments so that the ongoing recurring expenses are paid regularly, and that those new expenses or things that come up every month are done in a separate invoice. Really pushing providers to do something like that and getting the city to approve those recurring costs will help an agency stay in business. The other thing that we're doing is we want to work with the finance departments for all the providers to make sure that they're producing clean invoices so that the city doesn't have to nitpick all of the issues in an invoice. So it's really a partnership that has to be done, and everybody's agreeing on that. But the little things that we can do to move forward, we were doing wet signatures. Why are we doing wet signatures in 2023 after COVID? We were doing wet signatures during COVID. So that has pretty much stopped, but we still have to walk our invoices in, which just is, you know, those are the simple things that we could change to make it a lot easier.
I appreciate you sharing, and I'm thankful for the nonprofits, organizations who have stuck with this issue. But I think coming from the taxpayer's perspective, from what I remember in the last budget, there was a lot of money that was given to the homelessness issue. I remember I saw $20 million at one point additional. So I guess for the taxpayers, what can we do to let them, to have them have confidence in the money that's being provided? Because if all they hear is just give more money into it, but we're not seeing the results, the homeless population hasn't gotten better for the communities. I guess I'm trying to figure out what can we do to work together if all we're told is just provide more money, but yet we don't know what can we take back to our communities to let them know that we've provided these resources for the nonprofits or any other organizations that are helping with the homeless issues in the communities, yet we have these tangible results.
Yep.
I don't think that's been seen in communities. That's not what I'm hearing from mine, at least.
Yeah, it's a lot easier for me to see the tangible things. I totally get that. So an important point to bring up is prior to COVID, we had just under 4,000 individuals who are experiencing homelessness during the point in time count. During the COVID pandemic and after, we've only increased by 75 people. 75 people when Northern California saw thousands and thousands of individuals become homeless during COVID. What we did and what the city helped in accomplishing is our numbers didn't rise. And that should be something that is repeated over and over again, because across the country in any major city during COVID, the numbers of folks experiencing homelessness increased dramatically. So yes, that is a hard thing because we proved that we wouldn't make people homeless during COVID. We did that with the eviction moratorium. We also did it with the COVID money. So that $20 million that you're talking about went into housing and got over, in our program alone, got over 300 households housed. That's almost 800 people that would have been homeless if not for that funding. So that's part of it. It's also understanding all of the underlying things that are happening. We have, just based on pay, we're having a really hard retention rate for workers. So making sure that we're not only providing better income, but better training, and getting those kinds of things out there. In regards to the public, you know, they're seeing one of the things, I don't know if I can talk about this, so you can tell me if I can't. We've applied for a grant in aid, and the reason we applied for it is to create a web portal so that community members, as well as any legislators, can input information about someone who they saw who was obviously experiencing homelessness, and let's say, oh, he's got a festering wound or something. You can input that into this web portal that we're talking about, and we will automatically send it out to the right outreach providers. Those are very tangible things that people, I think the public wants to have, because right now they're calling the mayor's office, they're calling the governor's office, and we get calls and we're like, oh, it's the mayor, we gotta jump up and go and do those things. But that's not what we should be doing. We should be making sure that those requests are being funneled to the right entities so that they can actually follow up. So that's one of the programs that we would really like to start. They have it in LA, and it's a very successful program because there's feedback. And that's what I think our community members are looking for, is that feedback loop. Okay, yeah, we can't tell you that this individual has diabetes and he has schizophrenia, but we can tell you we went out on this date and we checked in with him and we are working with him. Those are the kind of tangible things that I think the community can really get behind. The other things that we would really like to push is there's a new concept called encampment disbursement. I don't like the name, but what the concept is to really work with an encampment, and that could be a group of 10 people or like 60 people, like what was out in Kaka'ako. I think it got well above 100 at one point. Focusing on those folks for a month, making sure there's no sweeps going on, but that we've got providers there every single day. And then at the end of that 30 days, we have vouchers in place and we can actually take them to housing of their choice and put them in housing on that day. You will see a complete disbursement of an encampment, which for a lot of our communities, those are the biggest problems. It's not the one individual who's not doing anything, just sitting there. It's these encampments that are kind of taking over areas. So if we can get a program like that going here, I think it would be very successful. The United States Interagency Council on Homelessness is supportive of these measures, and we have a HUD, technical assistance providers, that does this all across the country. So there's ideas like that that are very innovative that we have to be prepared for. If we have 20 vouchers at the beginning of the month, then we can work individually with these people. And if they want to live together, like in the same area, which is what we have found, people want their community with them. We can do that with this type of a program. Same with the tiny homes, Kauhale, figuring out what people want, where they'll be best served, and where they won't come back to where they were because they miss their community.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Thielen. Thank you, Chair.
And I know that this item is just on for discussion today for the reso. When does the point in time account occur? Is it January?
It always has to be within the last 10 days of January.
Okay.
So in coordination with the neighbor islands, we're counting on starting the morning of January 23rd, and we will be asking where people slept the night of the 22nd.
Okay. I wonder, so it might be too soon in January, but potentially we could do info briefing if you're interested in providing information. Also, ways the city can better support the work. And then also maybe, I don't know if we'll have conversations if you're open to it with Director Thielen and also the departments, just what Achieve Zero means. Or what it means with them being closed. Because my understanding is they probably affect 5 council districts from Kapolei, Aiea up to North Shore. So
we are making sure, just so you know, we are going through all the records to make sure that any clients that they were working with will be picked up by someone else.
Okay.
So we're making sure that those connections do get made.
Okay. And then what does street outreach look like in the interim aside from that? So is it just those individuals we know are in a particular area, or those are folks that are already housed that are?
In the districts where Achieve Zero is? There's several different types of outreach workers. So there's veteran affairs outreach workers. So if there's any veterans in that area, they're already covering them or can be used to work with them. Then H3RC, IHS, and US Vets all border that area. So they know a lot of the same people because there's no real lines for folks experiencing homelessness. So we're pretty confident that we'll cover everything, but we will be doing we're most concerned about the people that are right on the cusp of getting housing. So we want to make sure that we don't lose those people. So we're working on making sure that those are all addressed as soon as possible within this week to make sure that we have connections with those people. And Nikki Winters, who was the executive director of Achieve Zero, has agreed fully to assist with any of those warm handoffs if needed.
Okay, well, we'll continue those discussions, understanding we have 2 substantial info briefings on today's agenda remaining. Were there any other questions for Director Thielen? Just Chair Juarez.
Real quick. Well, first, let me thank you, Councilmember Wire. What a fantastic agenda. Homelessness, affordable housing, and a clean drinking water. So thank you for your leadership. And thank you, Laura Thielen, for your hard work, dedication, and passion on this very, very important issue. You know, I'm amazed to hear that only 75 more people since COVID. And that's a testament to the hard work that the city and the state and you are doing. But I will tell you, we continue to get complaints from constituents and business owners, and seemingly it's not getting better. But I hear you, and it's been 3 years that we've also heard the same things that you're talking about today, about streamlining the reimbursement to the providers. We got a lot of important people here in the audience today, so I'm glad you were able to say that and let the members here know that, because we'll continue to be your advocate and try to get that taken care of. As far as encampment disbursement, this is a goal. It's not something that's implemented just yet. Is that correct? And getting vouchers in place and then placement. Where are we currently placing people, and do we have enough places for people to live?
That is a great question, and thanks to the city and county, our program actually has a landlord engagement program. We are responsible for finding new landlords and having them agree to rent to our folks. That's coming up for RFP right now. We've housed thousands of individuals through that program, and the reason it's successful is the people on our team, our landlord engagement team, their only purpose is to find housing and to help people get into housing. So we work with other case managers and every single provider. If they're having trouble finding housing for their person, they will refer them to landlord engagement, and then we can help with getting them housed. We have over 500 landlords that we work with. We've gotten to the point now where landlords have called us on a few occasions and said, we have a building that we're going to buy. Can you fill it? And so, those are the kind of things that are just so amazing. Is it hard to find units? Yes, it's next to impossible for a regular person who's not earning a lot to find housing. We've been lucky. We can even find bigger housing for like families of 7 and 8, and that's very difficult. We also have broken down some of the barriers about pets. It's going to continuously get worse and worse if we don't keep on building. And my husband is now into affordable housing, and that's wonderful, but that's 25 units. It's great, but we need about 200 of those types of projects coming up every year. So anything we can do to increase the development of truly affordable housing, and I'm talking about the 60 to 30% of the area median income. We have been seeing more funding come for vouchers through HUD. We just got the Hawaii Public Housing Authority got $7 million last year to do a rent supplement program. That's wonderful, but that is only for 1 year's worth of rent. Our biggest issue is poverty. So even if we help a person for a year, if they have any kind of disabilities or don't have a work history, it's really hard for them to self-sustain. So making use of every voucher opportunity that can, like the emergency housing vouchers, those came out about 1.5 years ago. Those were specifically based out of COVID funds, but those will be added to our Section 8 rosters. So we have an extra 500 vouchers that were not in existence 3 years ago.
Yeah, thank you. And mahalo again for all the work that you're doing, and look forward to continuing the talk story. Seeing no other questions from committee, I'll ask Madam Clerk, are there any online unregistered testifiers?
Chair, there are none.
Okay, with no one registered or no one online, we'll go to in-person. I see Ms. Young, if you want to proceed, and if anyone else wants to come up, seeing no others, we'll close testimony after you, so please go ahead.
Aloha Chair and the City Council, Angela Melody Young testifying on behalf of CARES, a grassroots organization. I actually just chatted with the emergency team and asked, why does the city need to outsource to PIC? Why not conduct the surveys yourselves as a city office? Why do you need a nonprofit to do the work for you? Because the emergency team is trained in providing medical care, resuscitation, CPR, poison and trauma response, drug overdose. However, it does not know how to conduct training for social work aspects of working with homeless people, such as conducting surveys, engaging with the homeless, and doing point-in-time counts. It's another skill set. So, with the new model of care provided to homelessness, I think it's really transforming the city, and there's going to be a realization that this has to be a shared responsibility. From the health and homelessness briefing yesterday at the city, both city and state were represented there. They talked about the key is to demonstrate new models of housing, new solutions, such as affordability is split amongst communal support, peer specialists can volunteer to help homeless residents navigate, less money to spend on support, and vendors and businesses, developers to provide for the initial development costs, identifying developers that you trust to build and developers who are willing to pitch in for free. Without this new model and paradigm, you're relying on subsidies of taxpayers' monies to sustain the homeless system and the support services. That's an old model of operation from the traditional institutionalized support.
Mahalo, Angela. I appreciate that insight. Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Young? Seeing none, we'll close testimony. I won't be making a recommendation because this is just for discussion purposes and no action to be taken on the resolution. We didn't agendize it to be voted on today. So that resolves that matter on the agenda for now. And with your indulgence, we'll move on to agenda item number 4 out of order, just because we anticipate, lengthy discussion on a few different items. And so that is informational briefing, update on Red Hill by the Board of Water Supply, who I believe is present. Members, for your information, the presentation is in your handouts and available online as Departmental Communication 803. And Chief Engineer and Manager, please go ahead and proceed whenever you're ready. And maybe just turn on the microphone as well. No worries.
Okay, is this better? Thank you. Aloha, Ernie Lau, Manager and Chief Engineer for the Honolulu Board of Water Supply. You know, as we continue to work on Red Hill, we know that this will be an issue that will span probably decades for all of our community as it moves into cleanup or remediation. So I'd like to introduce Joyce Lin, one of our young engineers that I asked her to start working on Red Hill to prepare for the long term. So Joyce will do the presentation and I'll cover the FTCA claim at the very end. Thank you.
Thank you, Manager Lau. Good afternoon, Chair and city members.
While they're pulling it up, if you want to also state your name again for the record.
Okay, I'm Joyce Lin with the Honolulu Board of Water Supply and providing you an update on the Red Hill today. Sorry, technical difficulties.
No worries. And I'll just note we'll go through both yourself and then Chief Engineer before taking any questions from committee. And then we'll do testimony on this and then do the subsequent info briefing with questions and testimony again. And I'll also acknowledge the presence of Floor Leader Cordero. Almost 9, 8.
I tried just now. It's not changing. Sorry about that. Thank you again. I'm Joyce with the Honolulu Board of Water Supply, providing you an update on Red Hill. The Red Hill bulk fuel storage facility started defueling last month, October 16. And a week after that, the Joint Task Force Red Hill attended our Board of Water Supply's Board of Director meeting to provide us an update on their defueling process. And it was informed to us that everything was going well. And since then, we've attended additional meetings, specifically like the Fuel Tank Advisory Committee meeting and the Community Representative Initiative Group meeting, where we got more input and insight onto the latest defueling and closure and remediation updates. On defueling, as I mentioned, defueling started October 16 and was projected to complete January 19, 2024. However, as of November 17, the Joint Task Force has defueled 99.5% of the 104 million gallons of fuel at Red Hill. There are still some fuel remaining in the fuel tanks that is being defueled in this this coming up second phase of this defueling. There is a defueling supplemental plan 3 that was published on the 14th of November that provided more insight on closure. And they announced actually the establishment of a Navy closure task force, Red Hill, that is going to spearhead the closure of the Red Hill fuel tanks. So this is kind of like a timeline of the transition from the Joint Task Force, which is spearheading the defueling of the fuel tanks, and transitioning over to the Navy's Closure Task Force team. Right now, that just finished was the Phase 5.8, and it is told, I think December 8, the Joint Task Force will move on to Phase 5B of defueling, which is removing the remaining flowable fuel that's at the very bottom of the tanks. And that's also the time that the Closure Task Force is being brought onto the team to kind of streamline and get onto the closure process. And I believe they said that March 2024 is when they're gonna start closure. With closure, as mentioned earlier, it will be led by the Navy Closure Task Force Red Hill, led by Rear Admiral Stephen Barnett. There is there's talks of a closure plan update forthcoming next spring, 2024. What we do know as of right now is that the first phase of closure would involve the removal of the remainder 4,000 gallons of fuel that will be left at the end of defueling, and the 28,000 gallons of sludge, which they will be removed by a demolition contract. That means that they're actually going to be demoling the fuel pipes and then proceed to closure. In terms of closure options and selection, there has not been one determined yet. There were talks about non-fuel reuse of the tanks. The Navy hired the Nakupuna companies to conduct a series of surveys of what the best non-fuel reuse options are. There were 2 reports that were released recently. Unfortunately, the reports weren't as conclusive as we had anticipated. There were no specific options pinpointing selected, essentially. It just provided data, but there was no selection. But based on those survey reports, we're informed that there's going to be a report due to the Congress in February 2026, and we're hoping that that report will provide us more insight on what that final closure method will be, whether it's going to be used for non-fuel reuse or if it's going to be dismantled or closed completely. Tentatively, the full closure of the facility is still August 2027. This is a closer look of the task for the Navy Closure Task Force Red Hill, the structure, the chart of the task force. We're told during the fuel tank advisory committee meeting that there will be an update to this organization chart so that we have specific point of contacts, that we know who is in charge of what. And just some following upcoming events that we'll be attending. We have our December Red Hill remediation roundtable with the regulators and the Navy. And in January, we have our quarterly meeting with our 3 admirals. And this concludes my portion of the Red Hill update. Next up, we will have our manager allowed to provide updates on the FTCA claim.
Yeah, thank you, Joyce. So you talked about the filing of the FTC or Federal Tort Claims Act claim. This is a process that's allowed under federal law for a party to file against damages against the federal government. And this is a administrative process, so that there is a 2-year statute of limitations. So we took the event around the November 2021 contamination of the Red Hill Shaft, the proven contamination of the aquifer in that area, the contamination of the water system for Joint Base Pearl Harbor Hickam, as we felt that we had to file this claim in advance, a little in advance of that 2-year statute of limitations potential date. The claim is really, it is like I said, a process a party can file for claim of damages against the federal government. You mentioned the 2-year statute of limitation. It's administrative at this time. We have not filed an actual lawsuit. The military has 6 months to respond. If they don't respond in 6 months, then we may choose to, at that time, take it into federal court under a regular lawsuit. The amount is for about $1.21 billion, and this is really looking at the replacement costs for another Halava shaft in a different location. Should we never be able to turn on the existing Halava shaft again because of the contamination potentially in the aquifer that is the same aquifer that Red Hill Shaft on the one side of Halava Valley is pumping from, and we're pumping from the other side of the valley. The other part is about $25 million of costs already incurred, so a total of $1.2 billion. Bottom line, this preserves our legal rights, and we're doing this on behalf of our customers to recover costs from Red Hill. I've often said publicly that we are keeping all of our options open. And under the FTCA process, that's just one of the options. So we'll see where this goes. And that's it. Thank you. I'm available for any questions.
Okay, thank you, Manager and Chief Engineer. I'll just note that given that it's pending litigation or potential legal claims, my preference is not to go into executive session. I know that may take some time, but of course, if the committee so requests it, we can discuss it as a body. But I want to throw out, are there any questions for Board of Water Supply? Vice Chair Kiaina.
Thank you. First of all, I need to applaud your leadership and your team's leadership in filing this claim. I actually wasn't aware of this act, and so the fact that you're using every avenue possible to help to mitigate the cost, which was caused by Red Hill, and safeguard the interests of the public has to be lauded. A couple of things. First, and you already broke down the cost, so I'm not going to talk about that. But with regard to this Federal Tort Claims Act, who are the eligible entities to file this claim? Is it only Board of Water Supply? Could it be the public? Could it be an individual, a family, the city and county of Honolulu?
Councilmember, you're asking a question that is beyond my expertise as an engineer to answer questions related to law, but maybe I can ask the Corporation Counsel Deputy that supports us at the Board of Water Supply, Mr. Jeff Lau. Thanks, Jeff. He happens to be here, so it's perfect timing. So who can file a claim?
Hi, Jeff Lau, Deputy Corporation Counsel. We actually did not look into that question of who is exactly entitled to file a claim. We were only looking at it from the perspective of BWS, but that is something that we can look into and get an answer for you.
Well, that question is important, of course.
Yes.
Because the public was impacted, and depending on the strength and the strategy, I know you guys are developing that, but the city and county of Honolulu can join you. the state of Hawaii can join you. I guess I'm just looking, but so I just, first of all, I'm very pleased because in order to get someone to act, an entity, in this case, the Department of Defense, even if they are, you know, they have their plan in place and you've provided a very able update, your staffer provided an able update on the closure of Red Hill, but I still think it's necessary. And then second, I just want to let you know, and it's happening I'm probably at a lot of neighborhood boards. So people are trying, so this is helpful to explain the cost for this, but you need to know that with regard to the board's recent action on the increase in fees, the general public, of course, is confused. And questions are being asked at the neighborhood board level on what percentage of Red Hill is related to the increase in the fees. And so I'm pretty sure that your public information officers have been getting that questions, but it's something to think about because everything is interrelated. So maybe could you, I know that we're talking about this specific claim, but because it is top of mind for a lot of, you know, the taxpayers, could you explain what percentage of Red Hill has to do with the increase in the fees?
Yeah, I know that in the claim itself, we've identified $25 million in costs that we incurred as part of the Red Hill situation. The percentage that is on the under the rates that were actually, I can't use the word proposed because the board took an action yesterday to adopt, and it is a decision of the board to do that. I'd have to get back to you on the exact percentage, but we've identified projects that are in our 6-year CIP for to address the Red Hill, including monitor wells, continued additional testing that we're doing at sources closest to the Red Hill facility, so enhanced water testing, exploratory wells to try to find new sources. And we started a couple of years ago with the Contamination 2021, that event, to actually look at 6 or 7 potential locations, and we only found 2 that were viable. And we're just starting to embark on drilling those exploratory wells. So I would say the bulk of the costs we're looking in the next 5 years or so that's covered by the rate increase are going to be probably monitor wells, exploratory wells. And moving from there, if the quantity and quality of water when we drill the exploratory well for a potential new water source, if that's satisfactory, then we move into design. I don't believe we're going to actually get into starting the construction to the late part of the 5-year period, if at all. Because we have to go through the design and permitting
But whatever you could do to help your public information officers are the neighborhood board of contacts, because we just asked last night in Waimanalo, and it's very difficult to answer, of course.
I really appreciate that.
And so I just wanted to give you the heads up, as well as the proposal moves forward, then the public are going to want to understand the nexus and the impacts. And actually, you would probably garner increased support for this federal tort claims.
Yeah, definitely. That is an excellent point. Actually, we coincidentally are scheduling a meeting, I think it's next week or the following week with all our neighborhood board reps. So we'll be sure to prepare them with the numbers, how much out of the proposed water, the water rate increases are attributable to Red Hill. I do want to say, and I've said this before, the bulk of the cost is not only Red Hill. It is dealing with everything else we have as challenges facing our water utility, the increased cost of operation, the cost of construction going up. Those are all real costs that we're facing, the cost of power. It takes about $276 million right now every year in revenue coming in to operate and maintain the water system and to fund our CIP. So about 1/3 of that goes toward our capital improvement program. The other 2/3 goes toward electricity, operation and maintenance, and the cost of the workforce it takes to run this water system island-wide.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Chair Waters.
Thank you, Manager Lau. And I was just reading the Star Advertiser editorial section that the Navy they reported that the Navy has shown little interest in making up for its bad behavior. It has denied earlier requests for compensation from the Board of Water Supply and those exposed to contamination. It goes on to say that the Navy Secretary, Carlos Del Toro, only sent letters of censure to 3 admirals and 7 captains that could be directly involved in this catastrophe. And it really is a catastrophe. So my question to you is just to follow up on what the Star Advertiser reported. You and the Board of Water Supply have requested earlier request or have made earlier requests for compensation?
Yeah, we tested the waters by asking, can you pay for our monitor wells that we're installing to help further the understanding of the impact on the aquifer? And they said no. So right now there's actually no mechanism for them to give us money. So the FTCA claim actually now provides a legal mechanism for them to provide funds to the Board of Water Supply. The question will be, of course, and we're hopeful that they will understand and start to provide funds to the Board of Water Supply to offset the costs we anticipate to have to incur.
Now, I do want to follow up with a couple legal questions. So as you mentioned, the statute of limitations, and for those non-lawyers, that simply means that a plaintiff only has a certain amount of time to file a lawsuit. So in this case, are you saying the statute of limitations is 2 years?
It's 2 years and actually filing the administrative claim, filling out the SF-95 form.
Okay.
And we filled that out and sent it to the Judge Advocate General in Norfolk, Virginia, the Navy's
Okay, so
counsel.
filling out the Federal Tort Claims Act request, does that toll the statute of limitations, meaning that we fulfilled our requirement of making the request within the 2-year period?
My legal counsel advises me that is the case. And thank you for explaining the word toll, because that's not an engineering term for me. But
right, that we want to make sure that
we've reserved our rights to continue to pursue under the Federal Tort Claims Act.
Okay, terrific. Because it does seem like a lot of money, $1.2 billion, but keeping in mind the fact that this has contaminated our water source, and we don't know how much of this is going to cost down the line, right? So this is just a start.
Yeah.
And you did go through it really quickly, and I think it's worth taking a little bit more time on your slide deck. It's $1,183,506,516.43. That was for replacement
Halava shaft,
shaft,
wells, and Halava wells. And in the process, what we did was we had 2 independent cost estimates done. And actually, the whole claim, the filing is on our website. The full document with the cost estimates are there. So if you go to boardofwatersupply.com, look for the Red Hill tab, Protect Oahu Water, and you'll be able to download a actual PDF of the whole FTCA claim filing.
I think it's worth mentioning and highlighting, though, that we're going to have to replace the Halava well. Doesn't the Halava well service users all the way to Hawaii Kai?
The Halava wells and Aiea wells services the Halava Waimalu community. So that goes from like Halava Industrial Park, goes westward to Waimalu Stream. That includes like Pearl Ridge, that area, Aiea, parts of Aiea and Halava. The Halava shaft provides water to the Honolulu water system, which stretches now from Halava Valley all the way to Hawaii Kai to East Honolulu. And again, we took the precautionary step to shut down Halava Shaft because of what we saw happening to the Navy's water system and their water source just across the valley from us.
Right. And again, I don't want to downplay this. I mean, this is huge. You have to replace the Halava Shaft, Aiea well, Halava well, due to the Red Hill contamination.
That's about 17.5 million gallons of capacity. So what we're doing in the interim is look for new locations for exploratory wells, actually, and also pump our other wells harder to make up the lost capacity.
And again, you're making this claim of the federal government because they're the ones who are responsible for the spill, and you don't want to have Oahu ratepayers asked to shoulder the burden of the Navy's mismanagement, correct?
That is correct. Unfortunately, right now, I don't have a penny from the federal government, and I have to continue to operate the water system for the next 5 years and beyond because it's a critical lifeline service to our community, and also continue to invest in the infrastructure. I cannot not do anything until I get the dollars from the federal government, which could be years, and I don't know how much I'll get from the federal government. We are hopeful, but we're hopeful. I just want to leave it at that.
No, I appreciate that. And bringing this to the forefront of the public, we have to keep it there so that people stand behind you as I know they are now, but we can't let this just become,
It's important that this doesn't fade from memory because, and I commend and applaud the defueling, the joint task force with the gravity defueling, taking out most of the 104 million gallons, but there's still going to be fuel and sludge in that facility for years to come, at least minimum of at least 3 years perhaps. So until the last drop is out. But then there's also the past releases of this facility, which has been in operation like 80 years. And today, it was disclosed that the latest estimates now of potential leaks in the past, range from 600,000 to potentially 644,000 to nearly 2 million gallons of past releases.
Oh my God.
So, Chair, one thing I will, in my discussions with the military would be, we really need greater transparency here. Please share the full history and experiences of that facility so we can understand exactly how much leaked, what leaked, and so we can understand the scope of the problem we're dealing with on the cleanup.
Is it accurate that up until now the Navy has not been transparent with this information?
I think if you read some of the articles, like on the text messages, that has been a challenge from 2014 for us when we first got involved on this issue.
I'm happy that you reported that they actually are defueling, but as you mentioned just verbally and in your presentation, there are still 28,000 gallons of sludge that remain at the bottom of these tanks. Can you explain what the sludge is and how do you extract that?
This is after so right now they're moving into a different phase of gravity defueling. They're removing the fuel that's in the bottoms of the tanks. And that's probably from now, I think about another 60,000 gallons they're going to remove under the Joint Task Force Red Hill. After that, there's still going to be about 4,000 gallons of residual fuel and about 28,000 gallons of sludge. And that sludge is actually on the bottoms of each tank. And as far as I can tell, there are about 14 tanks that actually had fuel in them. 2 tanks have been out of service over 20 years, so they're clean. And some tanks had gone under the clean, inspect, and repair, so they're emptied and clean. There are 14 tanks to be cleaned out, and I think what they're identifying here is part of that process because fuel can develop sludge that sinks to the bottom of the tank, that combination of fuel and water that can't be flowed out easily. That actually you have to go into the tank to remove that. So 28,000 gallons maybe in 14 tanks.
I mean, I'm no engineer, but how do those pictures of the tanks that we've seen at various presentations, they're huge silos.
They're 250 feet tall, 100 feet in diameter, and it takes for them to do the clean, inspect, and repair process takes multiple years. So I'm not sure how long it's going to take. Well, they estimate maybe 3 years, at least 3 years to do this. So,
I mean, how do we all hold them accountable to make sure that sludge is actually removed? Because whatever residual fuel in these tanks or sludge can ultimately, if these tanks do in fact leak, can still make its way to the aquifer, right?
Potentially, especially the 4,000 gallons of fuel. I've asked them for more information about what does the sludge consist of it, how liquidy is that, or is it really kind of like thick molasses that doesn't flow easily? How will they remove it? Well, we're looking for more details, and hopefully in the closure report, the next supplement that may come out next spring, they'll provide more details there.
And Chair, if I may, I think Councilmember Say had a question. And then we can
I just have two more, real quick.
Because it is 356, and then we have the 51 pages plus questions about the housing plan, but I'll throw it back to you.
Okay, yeah, I apologize. And real quick, so lastly, we talked about demolition of the tanks, and there's a survey report by Nakupuna corporate companies. What is your opinion about whether or not we should be reusing these tanks or simply just deconstruct them and get rid of them forever? That's my feeling, by the way. Get rid of these tanks forever. That way, if nothing, we don't want them ever to be filled with fuel again, right?
Yeah, my opinion has been I don't want this experience to be ever repeated for our community because our water resources, our aina is precious, and we need to malama the aina and the water, the vai. So it would be dismantling the facility, and I would just say acknowledge that the Navy has at least verbally agreed to remove the 3+ miles of each of 3 pipelines that run from the tanks to Pearl Harbor. But then I would say go into each tank and maybe remove part of that steel liner in each tank so they can never bring something back in there should something happen like another war break out or something. We can't afford, our water resources, in my mind, are key to national security too.
Totally agree. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair.
Yeah, Mahalo, Chair. Councilmember Say, no questions. Sensing no other questions from the committee, just wanted to echo the thanks for all the work that you're doing, Manager Lau, and your whole team.
Yeah, it's a team effort, and we're just doing our job, our kuleana. Mahalo.
Mahalo. And with that, we'll go to agenda item number 3. This is informational brief. Oh, first I'll note there's no testifiers present or online, and so we'll close testimony and go to Madam Clerk. Is that correct?
Correct, Chair.
Okay.
There are none.
Okay, thank you. And we didn't have any registered either, so closing testimony on that item, going to agenda item number 3, informational briefing, presentation on the city's housing plan by Director Isari Matsubara, Executive Director, Office of Housing. We have the administration today, the whole team. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to Managing Director Formby. I appreciate you being here and everybody else that is that's here. Committee, we have also for those online, Mayor's Message 242, which should have been distributed, and that's the presentation we'll be going through today, along with Mayor's Message 243.
Good afternoon, Committee Chair Wire, Vice Chair Ke'aina, and Council members. Mike Formby, Managing Director. My slide is, it comes across as 4, but it's basically 1 slide. And I just highlighted some information that I want to share for you on 2, 3, and 4. And this is not to be talked through completely today. I just felt it was important for the council to know what we have accomplished over the last 3 years that puts us in a position to now put out an RFP to produce what we hope to be a permanent housing plan for the city and county of Honolulu. And so I think you all know, looking at the first page, up at the top, I have, let me see how I do this here. I have 1997, 2011, 2020 in the upper left. That's the second page of your handout. In 1997 was when we had embezzlement in the Office of Housing and Community Development, and the department was basically abolished. In 2011, council formed the Office of Housing in the mayor's office, and that was budgeted for 1 full-time position and a secretary. And it's basically stayed that way until we came into office in January of 2021. Below that, you'll see that in 2020, actually on December 8th of 2020, the prior administration made an irreversible, in other words, you could not change your mind, election for the city to retain its allocation of private activity bonds. And so we didn't know that when we first came in, but we found out, and once we found out, you'll see in the middle there, it says Core BFS DPP established the private activity bond program. And that took us basically 2 years to get that program set up. There had been no program in 20 plus years. There was no current handbook. There were no rules. And that's on the second line, you'll see it says DPP adopts the private activity bond rules, and that was in the beginning of 2022, in January of 2022. And that same month, prior to the legislative session, the chairs of the legislature called me over and wanted to talk about the private activity bond program. And they were concerned because prior to the city retaining its allocation, those funds had been going to HHFDC, and they had been using those funds to build affordable housing. And so now there was concern about how the city would work with the state on these projects. And in the last quarter of 2022, you'll see Craig Harai, Affordable Housing Policy and Strategy Specialist. He was hired, and Craig is here today in the back, and we're very thankful that Craig joined the city because Craig actually came from budget and finance, but before that had been at HHFDC, and he had the experience to run the private activity bond program, which enabled us in the beginning of 2023 to make the 2 awards that this council approved, and those were to Mauna Kea Tower and Jack Hall Waipahu. At the same time, Craig had been working with the legislature on introducing House Bill 923, and the purpose of that bill was to make sure that we could still maintain some control over our private activity bonds if we had an agreement with HHFDC on administering those bonds for the city. And it was in the conference draft of H Bill 923 that the cooperative agreement came into being. And we then began negotiating that. Denise joined us. She came from HHFDC. Kevin Alger came from Hawaii Public Housing, and H Bill 923 became law. The governor didn't sign it, but it became law, and then we started negotiating with HHFDC on the cooperative agreement, and you'll see toward the end of 2023, that is now a signed document. And so the benefit of that is they actually will administer the programs and the awards, but we have ensured that our allocation remains on this island. And so prior to that, when HHFDC got the allocation, they could use the bonds in any county. But now our allocation has to be used in Honolulu County, and we also have a say in how those bonds are applied to what projects. So we think that's very helpful. The next sheet basically shows that this administration, now that the rail project was about to achieve interim opening, that we wanted to focus on iconic TOD, and that's the green block on the upper right, where we went out and walked and assessed Iwilei Center at the end of 2021 as a potential TOD site contiguous with the rail station in Iwilei. You go down to 2022, we worked with this council, and I appreciate all of the help and support that you've given us throughout this 3-year journey, because you've been absolutely supportive, and you've shown leadership in making sure that the city has a very positive role in affordable housing, and we appreciate that. The council worked with us on revising the affordable housing appropriation budget proviso language, which gave us more flexibility to develop affordable housing. And then you go down to 2023, we had the letter of intent with First Hawaiian Bank, which is another property in Iwilei. And at the end of 2023, we're about to enter into negotiations now on the purchase of Iwilei Center and First Hawaiian Bank. And then what's really key is where it says 2024. In order for the city to be able to develop activated, mixed-use, transit-oriented development, we have to seek 2 changes at the state level. 2 laws have to be changed. HHFDC has development rights that we don't have currently at the county. And so right now, if we wanted to take that 3.4 acre Evelay Center site that we're about to negotiate on and purchase, we would have to build a Mayor Wright type housing complex. We could not build it as intentioned in all of our TOD plans where they talked about activated developments. We could not do that. And so the plan is to go to the legislature in 2024. We've already got legislation drafted and introduce these two bills and ask for the legislature to give the city and county of Honolulu the same right to develop activated transit-oriented development in Evelay and at other sites along the rail line as the state has. And we would like to ask for this council to support us as well. We've been talking to the unions. The unions have absolutely said they would support us in this. We simply want to be able to build a complex that people will want to live in Evelay, ride the rail, and feel like they can, you know, also live their lives, live, work, and play. And we don't want to build a Mayor Wright type housing project where there's no provisions, no services, no mixed-use retail available. And then what that leads to is the last slide, which is once we get the laws changed, and by the way, when those two laws change, we also have to change an ordinance at the city, and we'll be talking to you and proposing that to you as well. That allows us to fully develop TOD. Once that happens, Kevin and Denise have already been working on the RFP to go out because now we'll have basically made the systemic changes that were necessary for the city to fulfill its TOD responsibilities for the people, the public, and we'll actually go out and develop a full-on hard housing plan. But up until then, Denise is going to brief you today on where we're at, and if you have any questions, I'm here to answer. I'm happy to talk to any of you anytime offline about this if you have questions. I didn't put everything on there, but I put as much as I could. Thank you.
Mahalo for that. And I would prefer if we just go into the presentation to save time.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, mahalo.
Aloha and good afternoon, Chair Wire, Vice Chair Kia Aina, members of the Committee on Housing, Sustainability, and Health, as well as other council members. Thank you very much for the opportunity to share the administration's housing plan with you this afternoon. Although I feel like it was already shared, it was a great summary and we can breeze by a lot of this. So let me, if I could please, Chair, let me introduce my HOU team. The entire team has been here for less than 1 year, with the exception of Ailina Laporte, who many of you know, has been here since the beginning of Mayor Blangiardi's term. I'm very fortunate to have such a dedicated, hardworking team to help oversee, direct, and coordinate housing activities at the city. Starting with my deputy, Kevin Auger, whom we are very fortunate to have join us this past July. He brings with him nearly 4 decades of knowledge and experience in development and commercial real estate financing, having started his career with the related companies in New York. He has also worked for JP Morgan, Lehman Brothers, and Wells Fargo, where he was the managing director and co-head of the bank's Asia real estate platform in Hong Kong. Kevin was most recently the redevelopment officer at the Hawaii Public Housing Authority. Kevin, will you stand and be recognized? Thank you. Ailina Laporte joined the city in February 21 after being with the County of Maui's Department of Housing and Human Concerns, where she was secretary to the director. Prior to government service, Ailina was the Maui coordinator for the nonprofit called People Attentive to Children, which provides much needed social services to the community. I really want to thank Ailina for holding things together during the transition that has occurred within HOU over the past several years. Ailina, will you stand and be recognized? Next up is Cheryl Belisario, who joined HOU in January of this year after being with the state for 4 years, first working for Senator Russell Ruderman and later in the Office of Homelessness. Prior to this, Cheryl worked with various nonprofits to help improve the lives of community members in Hawaii, in the continental US, in the UK, and in Latin America. Cheryl, will you still please stand and be recognized? And last but certainly not least, Justin Limasa, who joined us in February. Also from the State Office of Homelessness, where he provided administrative support for the Hawaii Interagency Council on Homelessness. Prior to government service, Justin served as the marketing coordinator for luxury boutique retailer in Honolulu. Justin, will you please stand and be recognized? I also have to tell you that Justin is the magician that makes these PowerPoints work and makes them beautiful, and he does that often at home on his own time. So I really want to thank him. So as for the administration's housing plan, the following is an overview. I think MD covered a lot of what's in the plan. The plan, as he said, is the first phase of a more comprehensive plan that will be pursued once a professional consultant has been procured. It represents a collaborative effort of the Office of Housing along with various departments, especially DLM, DPP, and DCS. The plan was routed to the Affordable Housing Work Group, which is an internal working group assembled by the mayor to gain alignment and coordinate the efforts of multiple departments, because housing is one of the city's biggest challenge, and addressing the shortage is a top priority for the mayor and his administration. This plan is also going to illustrate the important role the city plays in the housing arena. So like most plans, this plan starts out with a reflection on demand. According to the 2019 Hawaii Planning Study, and by the way, this is the most recent study. I know a new one is due out in the first quarter of .24. Oahu needs an additional 22,000 units over a 5-year period. Of the 22,000 units, approximately 46.5% or 10,300 units are for sale units, and the balance being for rent. The point I want to emphasize here is that there's a strong demand for both rent and for sale. The difference between the two is only 1,500 units, or roughly 300 per year. The demand also runs along an entire housing spectrum, from low-income rentals all the way up to market rates. So the Blangiardi administration, as MD has expressed, is committed to working with the City Council to increase the supply of housing on Oahu. Part of the purpose of the plan is to articulate the administration's mission and vision for housing, as well as establish a production goal to assist us with evaluating progress and performance, all to help drive decision-making. We envision an Oahu where all residents have access to safe, stable, and affordable housing, so today's generations and future generations can continue to call our island home. Our mission: to drive unprecedented investments in 3 pillars of housing: acquisition, creation, and the preservation of affordable housing. Our goal is to work with the public and private sector to drive delivery of approximately 18,000 units over the mayor's 2 terms. How are we going to achieve this? Through a variety of strategies: investing in affordable housing, making process improvements, addressing regulatory barriers, capitalizing on TOD and investing in infrastructure, and improving the management and development of the city's real property. The next few slides will walk through some examples of these strategies at work. Strategy 1 calls for investing in affordable housing through acquisitions, incentivizing private development through policy and monetary incentives, maximizing the city's financing programs, optimizing the use of HUD funds, and establishing an affordable housing database, which is currently underway through a contract with UHERO. We've made 2 acquisitions so far this year. The first was Waikiki Vista. It's the largest ever affordable housing acquisition undertaken by the city for just under $38 million in federal funds. This building consists of 108 studios that were formerly occupied by the students of Tokai University. The city has collaborated with the state through the governor's coordinator on homelessness to open up a family assessment center and permanent supportive housing at this location in Moe'ili'ili. We're working on coordinating our resources, with the city providing the building, and the state providing the programming and operating dollars to address two of the most pressing problems facing both the city and the state: housing and homelessness. DCS is managing this project and is in the process of contracting with a nonprofit service provider for programming. Kiabai Place, a half-acre parcel in Kailua, was the second acquisition at $5 million, which included the land and construction drawings for the development of a 4-story affordable housing project containing 42 units. The primary area of focus for process improvements is DPP, since it has the biggest impact on development. They are currently working on improvements aimed at accelerating permit application review and approvals. They've undertaken several initiatives to improve operations and systems and made considerable investment in terms of time and energy on recruitment and training for employees. I believe DPP comes before this body regularly to update you on their progress. Strategy 3 involves addressing regulatory barriers. What we're doing here is reviewing city and state policies, laws, and admin rules related to housing to evaluate its effectiveness and pursue amendments if necessary. MD has mentioned a few. We're also currently working on things under the admin's control, like rules related to affordable housing requirements that have affected several projects in Ala Moana, TOD area, that have not been able to sell the majority of their affordable units after being on the market for 1 year. Partly because of the current high interest rates, but also because the income ratio currently required under our rules are more restrictive than that of the lending industry and adds an unnecessary layer of complexity for qualifying buyers. We've been working with DPP to amend these rules since August. Public notice is scheduled to be published in December with a public hearing to follow. The combination of Bill 1 and Bill 7, or Chapter 32, needs refinements of sorts to achieve its goal in actually spurring more development of low-density rentals. The plan goes into detail about the need for more procurement options under Chapter 38 for DLM to make the city's lands available for development of affordable housing. DLM is currently working on this, and it may be beneficial for the city to seek parity with the broad powers given to DLNR and HHFDC, so DLM can have more flexibility to exercise discretion in the bid process and also in the method of contracting. MD has already covered Chapter 46, but this is going to be critical for the city in order to pursue its goals. Under Strategy 4, we'll focus on TOD to capitalize on compact mixed-use development that incorporates a lot of things in addition to housing. The Interagency TOD Council identified 3 priority areas on Oahu, which are listed on the screen. As you all know, adequate infrastructure is essential to support housing development along the rail corridor. So the city has been working with the state on coordinating planning, development, and financing to accommodate projected growth. With the launch of the first segment of Skyline this past summer, the potential to fundamentally transform neighborhoods in close proximity to Skyline stations are very real. And we're seeing examples of this taking shape. Halava View, which is a development by Joe Michaels, is a 300-unit affordable rental project near the Halava Transit Station that broke ground in this past July, which the city helped finance with $5 million in affordable housing funds. Kaleimau Village out in West Loch is another example. It's located near station number 4, which serves West Loch and Eva Beach. It's 127 units on city land being developed by Stanford Car Development under a long-term ground lease. It's also being financed with the city's allocation of private activity bonds, $30 million in this case. Strategy 5 involves improving our real estate and asset management. DLM's core function is to develop and manage the city's real property interests. They currently manage around 1,400 units across 21 properties. There are there are also 63 special needs housing properties that fall under DCS for programmatic purposes. To ensure these properties are uniformly maintained, we are currently looking at consolidating these responsibilities under one department, DLM, so that we can be more efficient when it comes to budgeting for maintenance and repairs. I would also like to mention that reorganizing the housing functions to eliminate duplication and close gaps such as this is another important endeavor that we're engaged in. The mayor mentioned exercising his executive powers to reorganize his administration during his State of the City address earlier this year, and we've been working on a restructuring plan that will allow the city to be more effective and more efficient in delivering housing. In fiscal year 23, the city invested a substantial amount of time and energy to make capital improvements to its real estate portfolio. This includes renovation, electrical and plumbing work, and landscaping across the city's housing portfolio under DLM's jurisdiction. Capital improvement upgrades included modernizing building components at Chinatown Gateway, resurfacing the roof at Westlake Apartments in Salt Lake, completing piping repairs and landscape improvements at West Lock Elderly, and upgrading the gas lines at Kulananani Apartments in Kaneohe. Here are more examples of the capital improvements. Metrics. Metrics were established to evaluate the administration's performance and progress. Beginning with the number of units produced. These numbers come from DPP, and they show 1,600 units completed in fiscal year 21 and over 2,900 units completed in fiscal year 22. We're also measuring the number of units financed by the city. Two major financing resources were deployed for public solicitation, the private activity bonds, which MD mentioned earlier, and the Affordable Housing Fund. A total of $258 million in private activity bonds was awarded for the rehabilitation and construction of 950 units during calendar year 22 and 23. This is also the first public solicitation of the city's Affordable Housing Fund, which issued last year a total of $23.2 million, being awarded to 5 projects. We're also tracking lands that the city made available for the development of affordable housing. On this slide, we show 4 parcels. We also need to add Kihapai to the list. I'm going to whiz past these 3 other metrics that are in the plan, which tracks the numbers served, which was for 300 homeless individuals through the Crisis Outreach Response and Engagement Program from 21 to 23. And also, it reported 234 homeless individuals being assisted by the Homeless Outreach and Navigation and Unsheltered Persons Program, which is administered by DCS. Last but not by no means least, the performance of the Rent and Utility Program, which is a COVID-era relief program administered by OER. In addition to pursuing the current priorities for housing, the administration is also tasked with addressing non-performing assets held over from previous administrations that require considerable resources and capacity to manage and resolve. There are 8 that we're sharing with you today. The first is located in Waipahu, is the Royal Kunia Boxcar Lot. The site was dedicated to the city in '94 as part of the community benefits package for zone changes granted for the larger Royal Kunia development. The agreement for use of the property includes the development of a child care facility. In 2022, the administration worked with the consultant on a feasibility study, and the site was deemed suitable for development of up to 200 units of senior or affordable workforce housing. DLM is currently working with a consultant to conduct an EA. Next up is Verona Village, located in Eva Villages. This village has served as the residence for plantation workers previously employed by the Oahu Sugar Company, which ceased operations back in '95. So the city, back then, made a commitment to renovate and sell the homes to existing tenants. But the restoration was delayed because of the significant infrastructure needs, and then the department that was overseeing the project later dissolved. Years have gone by, residents are aging and passing away. Ivalai Resource Center. This property was acquired back in 2018. It's a 4-story building constructed with 27 studios, a homeless resource center, a commercial kitchen, a dining hall, and meeting rooms. Unfortunately, the project was never placed in service because the bond financing used to acquire the property contained restrictive covenants prohibiting the intended use of the space. Enna Road is the building is located in Waikiki and was acquired in 2018. Consists of 2 structures, an 8-story building with 33 units. The second is a mechanical operated parking structure that is no longer functional. The building had multiple issues at the time it was acquired. These issues have only worsened. Issues include the lack of compliance with building code and ADA requirements, and numerous repairs and replacements are necessary. The current plan for this is to issue a long-term ground lease to a private developer through an RFP process to see what kind of proposals the private sector will come up with for this site. Delight Bakery was acquired in 2019 using fiscal year 18 CIP funding for affordable housing with a preference for TOD. The administration is in the process of drafting an RFP to enter into an agreement with a private developer to construct, manage, and operate an affordable housing project at this location. Halona. This Waianae property was purchased back in 1990 when there was a 7-bedroom single-family home on the property that was vacant and dilapidated. In 2016, the city cleared the lot and placed 3 small modular homes on the site. What DLM found is that the property management companies were not interested in managing this project because it was not cost-effective. So to address that issue, DLM bundled this property with another asset in order to offset costs. 820 Ivalai Road was acquired in December 2020 for the purpose of building affordable housing, but its funding was restricted to TOD preference capital monies. Being that the parcel is only 0.12 acres, the site is very limited in terms of redevelopment opportunities. And as an interim use, the building is currently being used as city office. Mohalamai on Cintron Street is located in Macaulay and was acquired in 2018. Despite the low rent, with the target market being 50% AMI or below, the problem was in the design of the single-room occupancy units. The bathrooms are communal and renters were reluctant to rent a room in this project because it lacked individual bathrooms. The next set of slides is about what we, the administration and the council, have achieved together over this short period of time. So despite the challenges brought on by the pandemic, we were able to make meaningful progress in housing and homelessness. Starting with the rent and utility relief program, we covered the success in the metric section, but I just want to emphasize the national recognition this program received from the U.S. Department of Treasury as one of the highest performing federal emergency rent relief programs across the nation because of its speed and efficiency in distributing the assistance. And that is something we should all be proud of, especially Amy Asselby and her team at OER, Catholic Charities Hawaii, and the Council for Native Hawaiian Advancement for the tremendous work they all did to help the community. MD already went through the resurrection of the PAB program, but the significance of this achievement cannot be overstated. The city can now direct this limited resource to rental projects on Oahu. In the past, we were not able to do that, and the bonds went to all counties. I want to really thank the effort of our Corp Counsel, Dana Viola, for standing up the program, and also Craig Harai for coming over to the city and helping and working with you to issue the bonds. MD already went over the two projects that these bonds helped, which was Mauna Kea Tower and Jack Hall Waipahu. And also the tri-party agreement with the state that allows us to coordinate our bond program more efficiently. KPT is featured because it's going to be a major recipient of the city's allocation of bonds under the tri-party agreement, which is $93 million in the city's bonds to help 304 units on state land get redeveloped. The Ivalue Resource Center is an example of turning a non-performing property into a useful asset. The city is working with the State Department of Health to operate a crisis stabilization center and permanent supportive housing program for individuals with severe mental health conditions who are either homeless or unstably housed. The collaboration with the state will also involve Department of Health contracting with another entity to provide permanent supportive housing at this location. As an interim measure, Jim Ireland and his team at CORE was able to establish a temporary medical respite program in this building for individuals experiencing homelessness this past summer. The following next slides are examples of the city making lands available for affordable housing. First is Halewiliko, which is the site of the old Aiea sugar mill. This was made available through a competitive bid process and will be home to 140 new seniors. Halevaiolo Senior Residences is another example of the city making its lands available for affordable housing development. Mohalo Mai is another example of turning a non-performing asset into a productive one. Seeing the challenges of this building, the Blangiardi administration partnered with the Women's Prison Project and Housing Solutions, Inc. to transition this property into a thriving project for women exiting the justice system. This is the first city-facilitated supportive housing project for this particular vulnerable population and represents the city's role in helping reduce recidivism. Verona Village. That promise made three decades ago had not been prioritized up until now. The city entered into a development agreement with Savio Group and Habitat for Humanity to redevelop the village in 2 phases. This represents a monumental effort by DLM and the city's Corporation Council. Kapolei Parkway is another great example of the city making its lands available for affordable housing. It's going to be one of the largest affordable housing rental projects being undertaken with around 400 units on 2 lots and a preschool on the site. Construction began this past August with the first phase of homes scheduled to be move-in ready by August of 24. So to further encourage the development of low-density affordable rentals and apartments and BMX zone districts under Bill 7, the administration worked with the council to provide financial incentives for households at or below 100% AMI through Bill 1. Earlier this year, Mayor Blangiardi worked with Governor Green to secure an additional $5 million in matching funds from the state for this project. So out of the 9 permitted projects, 2 have been completed so far, one by Derek Locke for 25 units in Liliha, the other for 26 units on Ernest Street off Ward Street by Paul Lamb. This program can help developers like Paul Lamb take a 5,000 to 6,000 square foot lot that was sitting empty and turn it into 26 homes for our community in just 9 months. So at this time, we'd like to run a short video that illustrates what Bill 1 and Bill 7 means for affordable housing.
9 months ago, the lot behind me was empty. Now it will be home to 26 individuals and families.
I'm so excited what the mayor and Paul could pull off inside of a year.
Very, very impressive. Going up this quickly and be able to actually have people move in within 9 months, it's pretty fantastic.
Well, I really want to give Paul Lamb all the credit because it was his vision and his partners in this. You know, they were determined to make this happen.
Yeah, this is our first project, can't believe it can be done. I'm really excited.
They made a commitment, promise, and they lived up to it for our people, which is great. This is going to be a great home for a lot of people.
I think more and more people that can get excited about projects like this, just with the spirit of Paul, Evan, and their team. I want that to spread throughout the island so we can take care of our INA and we can take care of all the people.
I'm very excited about the potential of this, not just today in this existing unit, but what this means on a going forward basis.
I feel like we can do many of these projects and get up many, many units for our community soon.
This concludes our presentation. Mahalo for the opportunity to present. Happy to take any questions at this time.
Mahalo, Director, your team, Managing Director, acknowledge Mayor in the gallery again. I'll go to, I know Vice Chair had a question, so if you want to go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Director, for your presentation. And I know just given the, just how much information you had here, I know that it would likely require follow-up one-on-one meetings, if you don't mind, just to, for myself and my staff to be able to go over matters. So just due to time purposes, I will just ask one question relating to metrics, of course, with regard to your housing production numbers. You are looking to deliver 18,000 units over the course of the two terms, correct? And I guess my question was, could you elaborate a little bit? I do know on page 59 that you talk a little bit about what these projects are, but could you just explain in layman's terms? Are we talking about rental units and units that people can purchase? Are we talking about units that are available for a homeless population? Give me the universe of units that you're talking about so I can better understand who you are providing these units for.
Thank you for the question, Vice Chair Kiaina. So to answer your question, the target numbers in here come from DPP, and these numbers represent all housing units permitted. So it would be for sale, for rent, everything that is a known project. So that's how the data is tracked by DPP. We can follow up with DPP for more specifics, but that's my understanding. So in order to put forth a metric, we have to have a way to track it, and the existing systems to track it are based on what DPP has in place now.
Got it. And I'm just kind of understanding who are the beneficiaries. That's why, because it's all economic classes, correct?
Right. It's the gamut.
It ranges from, so it could be a homeless shelter.
I don't believe that shelters are included, but we can check with DPP.
But does it also include fair market?
It's gonna include all development that are not individually
that has a city nexus.
Everything that, not necessarily everything that is permitted by the city that is a project development, could be single family or multifamily, that is part of a project. It just doesn't count development by individual homeowners, is what I'm gathering. This is based on DPP data.
Okay.
So we can follow up with DPP to get more clarity.
And then you think your target of 18,000 units is a reasonable figure to shoot for?
I think it's going to involve a stretch because, the projections, if we look, first of all, the projections are a forecast. Based on my experience at HHFDC, it's hard to live up to forecasts. We always are below typically forecast.
Yeah.
So this is going to be a stretch because next year, given the high interest rates right now and its impact on financing, the numbers go way down. So we are going to have to be creative in what we do. And there's only so much government subsidy around to subsidize it. So there's going to have to be other things like taxing empty homes, speeding up what we do so that we can give developers more certainty and reducing the time. Time is money.
Thank you so much. What I appreciate is that you actually put the kitchen sink in here and included a lot of identifiable policy issues that the City Council could consider. Again, thank you for all your hard work, as well as the Managing Director's office. I look forward to having follow-up discussions in my office or in future hearings. Thank you so much.
Certainly, look forward to it.
Mahalo. We'll do floor leader, Councilmember Santos Tam, Councilmember Se, Councilmember Okimoto, all signaled. So just lead off of each other. So I'll turn it over to you.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Director, for being here and for presenting this and for putting into different strategies and also introducing your team because that actually helps a lot. First off, I would like to talk about a few, maybe strategies 3 and 4 together a little bit, especially since we just had our zoning committee. I'm not going to be specific about certain projects, but in general, we've been talking about TOD projects. We also talk about exemptions all the time. And relating to regulatory barriers, I know that there's been discussions about certain things like mentioning how development can pencil out. I asked about how can we have affordable housing prioritized without the need for other types of development to make certain developments pencil out, right? So if there has there been has the city administration been able, or working with the council, been able to figure out which types of policies we need to address immediately so that we don't have these regulatory barriers to have these things pencil out or development pencil out, or if there's something else that we should and could be doing to assist the developers.
Thank you very much for the questions, Councilmember Cordero. I think we list some of them in the plan. I think one of our first steps is looking at what's under our control, which is our own administrative rules. Some of them, especially the ones that are related to our affordable housing requirement, I think it's connected to Ordinance 1810, really need to be reevaluated because they add another layer of complexity. To give you an example, I think the plan cites an example that the debt-to-income ratio is a lot more restrictive than what the banks, employ. So we're working with DPP now to adjust that and let the lending institutions play that role and take that off of it, because what's happening is we're squeezing that buyer pool down in a high interest rate environment that's making the sales become zero. So we need to amend that rule so that we can broaden that pool. That's not going to completely fix it because the interest rates are what they are, but there is still an opportunity because you can always go in for a loan, say, this month, and then hopefully, on the chance that it will lower in 3 or 4. So go in for ARM, an adjustable rate mortgage, and then, refinance. So there's all sorts of things we can still look at, but we have to look within. As far as policy goes, I think MD mentioned Chapter 46 is going to be an opportunity. But then we also have to look at 201H. If we really want to support development, the state allows for affordables to go up to 140% AMI. The city goes only up to 120% AMI. with that option available, why do we want to send developments across the street when we can take care of it ourselves? So that's something else that I think we need to look at.
Okay, and do we have a timeline for addressing those policy amendments?
We don't just yet, but we've started the clock on, we're starting with admin rules first.
Okay.
Because we can control that, and there's supposed to be a public hearing coming up, notice is supposed to be issued. So we're going to work in that pattern, but yes, we have to develop a timeline for something like that.
Okay, thank you. And this is in really, my next question is in relation to things that DPP is requiring, but then we give exemptions for, such as like parking allowances or for maybe zero parking in TOD areas, right? We still are allowing like way more than like 100%, maybe even 20 to 100% more parking than we should be in TOD projects. And so does the Office of Housing or the plan set to, I don't want to say regulate, but remind our city agencies that we should be stricter on allowing for a lot more parking, especially in TOD areas?
You know, I would have to defer that kind of question to DPP and the planners. But that's a very good question. I would want to get insight from DPP on that.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it. My one last comment, and it's not a big one. I know it's this. Hopefully, this is a working document because I know that there's a lot of projects here in my district. But I know you know, name or nomenclature is super important, especially for project and also for namesake, right? But just want to make sure that Honolulu Highlands is I guess highlighted as its new name. Okay. Aloha.
Good catch.
Ia Honolulu. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. First of all, you know, we as a council often get plans, ideas, reports, and they often kind of sit on the shelf and they get received here with some healthy skepticism. But I've had the chance to look at this back and forth. I've got tons of Post-its. There's probably about 50 Post-its stuck in here. And I want to thank you for putting together something really detailed. I'm really actually impressed. And I wanted to say that while we have the mayor and managing director and deputy managing director, because I think everyone has to kind of work together on this. And certainly, at least myself as a council member, I'm happy to be working on this. I'm really happy to hear that the admin's been working on a bill over on the state side to deal with the Chapter 46 issue. I just got a draft from Senator Chang, chair of the Housing Committee, to deal with that. So, you know, I hope that there's some synergy. I'm also looking forward to working on revising the Chapter 38 rules, because I think that's really important. However, since we have the admin here, I do want to mention, I think that there's a lot more work that needs to happen with DCS and DPP and your office, Denise, kind of working together. You know, this debt to income ratio issue, you know, I think that's something that should have been solved a long time ago. This morning in zoning, I alluded to the AMI issue with regard to the Bill 7 projects and that 80% AMI issue where the allowable rents for Bill 7 projects are being calculated based on Section 8, whereas at 21H projects, in fact, the one we just approved in Waipahu is based off of the HHFDC standard, and that difference is in my mind very problematic. So Denise, what's the status of resolving that issue, the 80% AMI issue that the Bill 7 developers have been facing?
Thank you for the question, Councilmember Dos Santos Tam. My understanding is because this issue was raised in terms of at least the 80% AMI rent for Bill 7, it was researched and investigated with Corp Council, and it was determined that it is not applicable to Bill 7 projects because that is a form of by right housing and these admin rules do not apply. I think it's also because the rules were in place, I think, before or after. The timing didn't match, so they're not applicable. But in principle, that admin rule needs to be adjusted because it's based on fair market rent values, which are tied to the housing choice vouchers, really. And it's typically for public housing, right? It's when you're going to renew your standard amounts and the rents, and so they really don't match because these units are privately financed and there's no regulatory agreement that connects it to a HUD-HAP contract that says you're going to get these housing choice vouchers, right? So it's almost artificially suppresses the rent so that when the developer comes in for financing, they can't show the rent income stream that is going to be able to make the project financeable. So we're working on that.
Okay, good. I'm glad to hear that, and hopefully we can get that resolved soon. I also understand that some of these Bill 7 projects, I know we saw the video of Ernest Street, great project, but that project got stuck with their certificate of occupancy, and they were waiting for a building permit to be issued, even though they were able to start construction without it, but they couldn't get the certificate of occupancy for months, and they were kind of sitting there. What are we doing, and this may not be for you to answer, but what are we doing at DPP for these Bill 7 projects so they're not stuck? We could have had this project open and had people move in months ago.
I think that's a very good question, and it's an important concern, and we will follow up with DPP.
Okay. And that's not to say, on our side, we don't have Bill 7 issues that we need to resolve. I think that there's some things that we can do on Bill 1. And then also some inconsistencies with the LUO as it pertains to apartment zones. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that we need to be doing in order to create more housing. Anyway, I'm going to wrap up because I know other people have questions. But the last thing that stuck out to me in this report is there were several instances of the city leaving money on the table in past years. And that's clearly not acceptable. Now that you're in this role, can you assure us that we're going to be aggressive in pursuing every opportunity for federal money, state money, grants and other things so we can get some of the stuff moving?
So when you refer to leaving money on the table, can you be more specific in terms of the federal funds that you're referring to?
I think it was things like we weren't applying for our allocation from HHFDC. And let's see, things like that. That was kind of the main one. Our project and some of the project-based vouchers, I think we weren't issuing those. Just issues like that.
So thank you for the question. So as far as project basing with our vouchers, this is a program that we have not, my understanding is DCS is not undertaken yet. I know that they didn't have the capacity at the time, but they have since hired an administrator for their voucher program, and I believe they are working towards it. I know I did see Edward Laswanos, our deputy from DCS, in the room, and we can follow up with him, but I know that Director Krucky is committed to working to gain that capacity and look at using that as an important resource. As far as the federal funding, are you referring to the Housing Trust Fund?
Yeah, I think that was what that was.
Okay.
I can follow up directly, but I guess what I'd like to hear is just, assurance that we're going to be moving forward and being active and proactive and making sure we're getting every available dollar in every available program.
Yes, thank you for your concern. And yes, DCS has committed to work on those areas.
Definitely. And we'll come back around if there's more questions. I'm going to poll the members. We do need to take testimony before we lose quorum, and I can't adjourn if we lose quorum. Are folks okay still doing questions? Looks like we're good. Okay. Councilmember, did you have any additional questions? Okay. Councilmember Say, and then Councilmember Okimoto.
Thank you very much. Just have a couple questions. The first question for me was that it's taken me 3 years to learn about the alphabet soup, how housing is related to 4 or 5 departments. Has the administration consolidated, meaning come together to look at all of these? As an example, we had the discussion in regards to DLM. Some of our colleagues who may not be aware of what DLM stands for, which is Department of Land Management, which I truly believe that Ms. Teschner is doing an excellent job, that we don't go back and look at some of our city and county properties as far as the inventory that is out there. Has there ever been a discussion on a blanket request for proposal for all of these city and county projects for rentals, 80% and below? That's number one. Number two, the other point I wanted to make was that, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that the goal that the administration is looking forward to of 18,000 is bold, very ambitious, but I think it could be done. Do you incorporate in the metrics, as an example, the Kool-Aid project? Right, 1,000 units that this council adopted in January, and 60% plus was affordable. See, that's where I think you can say, maybe I can say this. Is that 1,000 part of the 18,000 equivalent? It is.
It would be counted,
See,
yes.
and that's where maybe we're losing that interpretation with one of our colleagues that has left already. That my point this afternoon is that there are private developments that come before the county council, and this should be part of the overall inventory of units that we have supported. And that's what I'm trying to get across to a lot of the general public out there. So those are my two thoughts. All I can say to you is that it's been 3 years, and for the freshman class who are not the freshman class anymore, you know, it's been great that, you know, we have moved this far as now having this office that is much more consolidated, much more thorough in their thinking about what housing is all about. And they can relate to each other, like for BFS. Thank you very much for the, you know, private activity bonds for the 2 or 3 projects. That's the ones that was left on the table. And, you know, with the nudging of Chair Waters and all of the council members, we're putting your feet to the fire, Ms. Matsubara. So keep up the good work, and I'll close with that at this point. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Say.
Thank you. Councilmember Okimoro.
Thank you, Chair. Aloha, Director Matsubara. Thank you again for being here. I want to echo sentiments of some of my colleagues, all of us. I remember being here earlier in the year, prior to you being hired. I remember the mayor standing here with exciting news that he had found somebody, and there were some frustrating hearings prior to that because we had been asking for some kind of plan, and I think a lot of us didn't feel that what was presented to us was sufficient for our understanding. So I want to thank you. I know that you've been working diligently on this, as well as the administration. Mahalo. I do think, just as was shared by the Vice Chair, that we'll have side meetings to kind of ask separate questions. But I did have two questions specifically. You mentioned, or maybe MD mentioned, and I do remember the mayor talking about the importance of the reorg. I think my question goes along the lines of, there's a lot of departments, mainly DLM and DCS, that you seem to overlap with sometimes. In your meetings with the administration, have there been talks and movements on how you could separate some of those things so that there's not overlapping or duplication of the duties or responsibilities to kind of streamline the process of how we can navigate through the housing issues that we need to take care of?
Thank you very much for the question and the comment, Councilmember Okimoto. That's exactly part of the conversations that goes on. So we have assembled a work group that consists of a housing committee chair and also a few developers, as well as the heads of DCS, DLM, DPP. So we're all working together to do just that, identify the gaps, identify the duplication, and then look at where things should be placed so that we can operate more efficiently and more effectively, because we need to get stuff done. So
could you give us maybe a status update on where we are in that process in your meeting? So have you been able to, where are we in the process of starting, and where we can get to the point where there are duties that are separated or assigned properly to the departments?
So at this point, we are still working on that as a group. We can share it more once the mayor has approved our recommendation. So I think we're still working on it at this point, and once he approves our recommendation, certainly we can bring it out publicly.
And an estimated timeline, just so I have a concept of when that could be.
So I believe the mayor committed in his State of the City that he would have a plan, a draft plan at least, by the next State of the City.
Okay, thank you. And last question, you had in your plan gone over there were 8 properties that I counted that the city has acquired, and I thank you for kind of going over and giving the details, the history of some of them. You only, if I counted correctly, had gone over 3 of the 8, given an update. So the other 5, what's happening with those properties? The ones that I took note of were the Ivale Resource Center, Mohalamai, and the Varona Village. Those ones you had at the end of the presentation kind of given an update, but the other 5, what's the status of those?
Are you referring to the non-performing assets?
That might be it. Yeah, you heard, yes, the non-performing. What are we doing with the other 5 things? Is there updates on that?
Yeah, I think I went through the critical ones that were outstanding, but I'm happy to come by and tell you about where things are at. Sure.
Thank you, Chair.
Mahalo. I'll ask 2 quick questions. I think we'll go back to floor leader, and then I didn't sense any other questions from anyone else. And so I just wanted to ask, when we're talking about going up to the 140% AMI, do we have any calculations yet on what that financial impact would be on, like all the waivers and all that in terms of to the city, or is that ongoing?
I wouldn't know what that would look like, but I want to say raising the AMI level, I wish we've done it a year ago.
Yeah.
Because right now interest rates are so high, the buying power of the home buyers have shrunk by $100,000 or $200,000. So it's all going to depend on the tables for the income levels. But yeah, I couldn't give you an estimate as to what that would amount to.
Yeah, and no problem. I didn't know if they'd come up yet, because I do think I think it totally makes sense, and it's a valid policy to look at. But I do think that's going to be some of the pushback too, like if we're subsidizing. And of course, that's even loaded, because some people would say it's not a subsidy, it's not government money, but that would be a conversation that's going to come up if we approach that. And then last question for me was just, could you tell me a little bit more, or tell us a little bit more, what did you mean by parity with DLNR when we're talking about DLNM and how to fix that?
So that, I think, was referring to DLM and their Chapter 38 rules, because right now my understanding, and really DLM director should be the one that has the knowledge on this. My understanding is they're limited to an RFB, so a request for bid, and in certain circumstances they can do an RFP, but that's about it.
Yeah.
And DLNR, I know for HHFDC, you can do an RFQ, an RFI. You can even do a direct negotiation if you've got a lot that has a lot of issues on it, and you're going to have a problem finding developers that are interested in it. You can do direct negotiation. So it just broadens the ability to get stuff done.
Okay. So we'll have like a draft version to us, or would that be a state law procurement issue, or?
I believe DLM is working on amendments.
Okay, perfect. I'll go to floor leader. I know, Chair, if you do have questions, you can chime in after. And then I also wanted to invite Mayor, if you wanted to say anything at any point, feel free. No obligation to, but you've been sitting here, with your team and everything, so feel free to chime in if you wanted to add anything at the end, but floor leader.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to end on asking about planning around TOD stations and areas. I know I'm
sorry to interrupt, I'll designate, will designate Chair as a voting member for committee. Keep going, my apologies.
Why not me? No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. I'll be here. Okay. Okay. Hold on. What was I gonna say? Okay, relating to TOD stations, and I was going to say I'm biased because I have the most rail stations with that, a lot of the TOD area. And so relating to that, I wanted to go to, touch on strategies 4 and 5 TOD, and then of course investing in improving real estate and asset management. And I want to put two of those together mainly because along the rail, along the TOD's corridor, we are planning to rely on a lot of the private buying of property, and also like developing, and also figuring out what would go there, right? But I think a lot of the times maybe people won't really know what to put there, and I don't want it to be kind of like I guess too mixed, where we will have too much of one type of development versus a mix of development along the rail stations. So I was wondering if there's a way that the city administration, through any of these strategies, mainly, of course, strategy 4 related to TOD, and then 5, if we have any possible assets around the rail route, or if we're looking at any acquisitions of assets around the rail stations, to be a role model for along the rail stations. Because once we start to do that, maybe there will be other possible properties that would be acquired that we can set the tone. You know, we can set the tone to, this is how a nice development can look near this rail station. And so I was wondering if we can do that, because, or if there's already discussions about that. And if not, I mean, we're absolutely gonna have to start talking about that.
Thank you for your question, Councilmember Cordero. So my understanding is, and this is really in the TOD section of DPP, that they already have TOD plans for each neighborhood. There are neighborhood TOD plans where they go into the planning for that development. But since you mentioned that, there's a huge opportunity for us in Evilea with the future Kauai station coming up. And so the city is looking for pretty robust development in that area. So that's going to be a good example of where we can take advantage of that. The largest landowner, my understanding, is the state for lands across the rail. What will really help is once UHERO, who has been contracted to do a database and inventory of all the price restricted and subsidized housing that comes up, they'll also, I believe, do inventory of lands. So I think that is one area of hope. And I think we can also work with the Office of Planning at the state level, because I believe that a mapping was done, at least a preliminary map of all the lands available for rental housing.
I mean, yes, of course. And also, I mean, looking forward to properties that may or may not be, that aren't available right now, but may be available in the future. I'm thinking OCCC that we have across the street, where, you know, in the future, the blood bank property is going to be available, or not available, but possibly available, and then Pu'ahale Market, which is available. And so it looks like I keep talking about that corner in my district, because I feel like there's an opportunity there for if the city were to invest in just not a corridor, but like the corners of just that intersection, from Blood Bank to OCCC to Pu'ahale Market, and I don't know if we can get the other corner there off of Pu'ahale, to be something where the city can invest and really, I guess, I don't want to say spruce up, but like, I can't think of any other words. My brain can't think of any other words, but just like really set it up for proper and good development that will serve the community, and also for units as well. And it's close by. It's not at the rail station, but it's just a block away from the rail station, just a street away. So, I mean, we can be a good example. I just want us to be a good example for great development near rail stations too.
Sure, I would agree with you. I would consult what our TOD plans are for that neighborhood first, and then see where that is. But absolutely, we want to be an example of what great development looks like near our rail stations.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So we'll go ahead and take testimony. There's no other questions. No registered testifiers. I see Ms. Young, if you want to proceed. And then I'll just ask Madam Clerk, are there any online testifiers, unregistered or registered?
Chair, there are none.
Okay, so see no one else in the gallery, we'll close after testimony after you, Ms. Young.
Aloha Chair and the City Council, Angela Melody Young, testifying on behalf of CARES. So going to testify about the housing and homeless work presented, two of the wicked problems of Honolulu. Taxation policies which support homeless solutions are the federal low-income tax credits and state rental housing revolving funds. This is a shared pool of funds also for affordable housing. The big challenge is government ends up cycling through subsidizing things, vouchers for people to afford the housing built by government, and requiring more subsidies to pay for governmental services to support the homeless. It's an endless cycle, just as the homeless cycle in and out of the system, the government is also cycling through funding. So there are new solutions that are being talked about, which are more health-related, creative, and full of care. Kahale, which is a communal housing, brings down operational development costs. And from the Spotlight Star Advertiser, which is they've since sunsetted the show, but if you go back and listen, the director one of the directors who worked with Kahale talked about the work with 100 different vendors, and the material and supplies were almost free, from engineers, architects, contractors, to provide volunteer labor. And there's also a transformation model from STAR, Denver, Colorado, which has a replicated version of what from Honolulu, the core, Crisis Outreach Response Engagement. So across the nation, STAR from Colorado, Mobile Loaves and Fishes, which is a Christian organization from Texas, which provides land according to the criteria of HUD's definition of chronically homeless. And so, yeah, I'm just going to testify in support of these efforts for the work presented today, and also to encourage work with the nonprofits, the church and medical students, health organizations, and collaborative sectors. The work is going to require the church and the state. And although the community hates the church, the work must go on.
Appreciate your testimony, Ms. Young. Are there any questions for the testifier? Appreciate you sticking it out. I know it's been a long hearing. We'll close testimony with that. Just wanted to say mahalo. I'm equally impressed, as Councilmember Dos Santos had mentioned, with just the depth of this. So appreciate you, Director, and everyone in the gallery, honestly. And I know that I'm sure this is just kind of that foundation, and over the next 5 years, I'm sure there'll be additions to it. So appreciate your work. Clerks and OCS and all the other staff, Olelo, everyone being here. Any final thoughts from admin? If not, Councilmember Say can close this out.
No, I'm not going to close it off. I just wanted to ask a question that is a dream. But with the acquisition of 1615 Alawai, which we have possession of, what do you see within the next year to 2 years as far as any major development of a affordable housing project?
Well, I guess once the negotiation is, and it's settled, and we can acquire.
It's settled already. We condemned it and we bought it. So my point to you is, what do we do next, the process?
So
I'm trying to determine a fine deadline to say by 2025, this vacant property will have an apartment which is affordable, maybe tied to Bill 7 or Bill 1, whatever it is. I just want to figure out how long would it take us. I wish more members were here to understand how long it takes for the process to start. And that's the reason why I pose this question.
Okay. Thank you for the question. I believe DLM is working on an RFP. I can't give you the time frame off the top of my head, but we can get that for you and get back to you.
It just adds, maybe another 100 to 200 units to the inventory that we're trying to address the 18,000. That's the reason why I pose it.
Every unit counts.
Yeah.
And there might be an opportunity to do either January, I don't even know what date the State of the City is, but at the January or February committee to do an update on the housing organizations. I know Councilmember Okimoto is interested in, I'm sure others are. But we'll talk to you offline, but just something to consider.
Sure. Sure. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for the time. Mahalo.
Thank you. And there being no further business, this meeting is adjourned. Mahalo.